The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are merely an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibility for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast which aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community.
Welcome back to the Enough podcast. I am Rich Gill.
And I'm Kendra Sheets.
And today we are introducing a new episode format for you all. A number of people have reached out to us since we started back in July of last year, which seems like a lifetime ago, but also like 2 months ago. Sometimes also time has no meaning.
COVID timeline. Time doesn't make any sense.
COVID timeline. The vast majority have given us so much support, and we thank everyone for that. It means the world to us. It keeps us going. It lets us know that what we're doing is important and that people want it. So again, thank you for all of that. They've also let us know that listening to the guests tell their very personal stories of assault and abuse can sometimes feel very overwhelming.
We heard this and we totally understand. And that's why we're going to be offering up additional informational episodes about a variety of different subjects and terms that we freely discuss and use on the podcast. Many of these are going to be available in both the audio format, which is the traditional podcast format that so many of you listen to, but also via our YouTube page with graphics and slides.
And to reiterate, we've said it before and we'll say it again. We're not doctors, we're not therapists, we're not trained professionals. We have some training in this area, but we're not professionals. We're two people who've been active in the music scene for decades now, long enough definitely to witness and hear just a number, too many stories of abuse and harassment and assault over the years.
And the information that we've put together for this new format is gathered from reputable internet sources, from articles and books, all of which are accessible to the masses and which we will cite for each one of the episodes.
We hope you enjoy this new alternate format, which will be intersped between our interview episodes and as a way to sort of call it maybe a little bit of a palate cleanser so that it's not just, heavy stuff all the time.
And today's topic is something that we have been accused of supporting and perpetuating with our work. It is cancel culture, or also known as, or similar to, call-out culture. The trusty old dusty Merriam-Webster defines cancel culture as, quote, the practice or tendency of engaging disapproval and exerting social pressure.
In today's society, cancel culture is the, quote, withdrawing of support for an individual or an entity who has been deemed to have acted or spoken in an unacceptable manner, end quote.
Various online sources claim that the term cancel culture was coined back in 2014 as a part of the Me Too movement. In March of 2014, activist Sui Park called out what was meant to be a satirical tweet from the account of the Colbert Report, which she felt was a blatantly racist tweet about Asians. She ended her tweet against the show with hashtag cancel Colbert. This created a backlash against both the Colbert Report and also Park herself.
In theory, this practice of attempting to remove people from certain sects of society has been in practice for centuries. From boycotts of corporations who misalign themselves with crooked politicians / child labor / unfit wages or work conditions, to simple schoolyard clique politics, humans have used cancel culture in its basest form to remove those who they no longer want to be affiliated with.
Over the last decade, cancel culture has been frequently paired with online shaming, which is more prevalent now than ever, as we all know. With this, the term cancellation itself has actually been adapted to include widespread, outraged online responses to certain statements or against a specific target. With the ease of social media, demands of cancellation can spread like wildfire, and with a quick comment or a click of a share button, can invoke a mob-like mentality across the internet. And the frequency of which outrage leads to cancellation has created a culture of such, which rounds out the whole of the term as we use it today.
Question is cancel culture a good thing or a bad thing? The answer is that it depends. Adrienne Marie Brown's book, We Will Not Cancel Us, states that callouts have a long history as a brilliant strategy for marginalized people to stand up to those with power. Callouts have been a way to bring collective pressure to bear upon corporations, institutions, and abusers on behalf of individuals or oppressed people who cannot stop the injustice and get accountability on their own.
And a University of Michigan professor named Lisa Nakamura makes the argument that canceling someone is a form of a cultural boycott, and that cancel culture is the, quote, ultimate expression of agency, which is born of a desire for control as people have limited power over what is presented to them on social media, and a need for accountability, which is not centralized, end quote.
We need to understand that canceling is a form of instant judgment and punishment, which are practices of power over others. And punishing someone definitely does not stop the cycle of harm. There also seems to be a weird pleasure in almost punishing each other via public online humiliation these days. That's what a lot of social media seems to be. And we've all seen it. You can't escape it. It's there all the time. Destroying a person doesn't remove the systems that allow harmful people to do harm, though. We need to reconstruct those systems, and then the people who live within them will hopefully be realigned. That's the hope, anyway.
That being said, canceling someone or something has been used as a swift, albeit temporary way to deal with someone or something who has proven themselves to be problematic. For example, I hate to date us if you're listening to us years from now, but it is the first part of 2022, and there was a recent situation with an East Coast punk band called the Stolen Wheelchairs, or maybe Stolen Wheelchairs.
I think it's just Stolen Wheelchairs.
Now I've dated myself in not being able to know who the hell this band is. Oh, God.
You can look them up on the YouTubes.
Yeah, or don't, because it sounds like they kind of suck.
Just kidding.
At a party, members of this band found a woman's phone somewhere in the house that they were at, and they used it to send private, intimate photos of herself to people on her contact list.
One thing we should maybe clarify is not that it matters, but this was someone that the band knew.
Right.
Also.
Yeah. And then in addition, they also took photos of themselves, or a band member did of himself. I'm not 100% sure the number of people, but they took their own private photos, nudes, whatever you want to call them, and then sent those to people via her phone as well. And that ended up in this giant online lashing and explosion when everyone kind of got wind of this within less than 24 hours. And members of the band left. And let me note, they were in the middle of a tour while this was going on. So the band tour was done. The band is now done. They've been removed from their label, and they've basically been branded as giant assholes all across the internet.
The act of removing them only temporarily fixes the problem. There's always going to be a handful of people who do things that we, as a collective whole, in whatever way you want to see that, don't agree with. So canceling them is a temporary fix to remove them from the group in an attempt to keep others safe. But we need to change the culture of the group in which we live so these things don't keep happening. Just pushing out the bad apples, so to speak, isn't going to change the culture. Doing that, we're just playing cancel culture whack-a-mole until forever. And it just never ends.
And I feel like that's kind of where we are now. And that's how almost why the podcast kind of got started, is that these people do something, there's an uprising, they go back down because people are hitting them over the head, and then they surface, they give a period of time where they're just in wait. And then about 6 months later, the next thing you know, they booked a nationwide tour and you see them again. And they might have lost some of their steam because people are branding them as assholes, but they either made some sort of comment or something that brands them okay to the other half of people.
Sometimes it doesn't even need to be that, though. Like with the example, to go back to the Stolen Wheelchairs thing, there were many comments I saw online where people were just like, well, it just sounds like, drunk dudes being drunk dudes and just like acting up and whatever. Like this is someone's life that they're playing with. Like it's not just boys will be boys culture.
Right. And one of the things I kept seeing was like, what did you expect from a band who went on tour with the Casualties? You knew they were going to be terrible or something like that. And you're just like, yes and no. Like, I understand the comment. It's kind of like when people come out of the woodwork to be like, someone's like, hey, this band's full of like abusers, and someone's like, never liked them anyway. Like, that doesn't
Right.
help the scenario. That doesn't
Right.
fix anything. Good for you that you somehow didn't like their music and therefore had the sixth sense to understand that they were all rapists. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. Let's stay on track.
Right.
So in saying that much, we are all human, and good people have done bad things. As we've discussed a number of times in this podcast, neither Rich and I are the same people that we were 5 years ago, 10, 15, and thank God for all of that. So if canceling someone is only a temporary fix, what is the next step that would actually fix the problem? Well, Rich kind of commented on already. We need to also see reform of actions. People need to admit their wrongdoing and apologize to the people that are involved from the people that they've wronged, and really actually mean it, and understand that in apologizing to these people, it's not a guarantee that they're going to get an acceptance of that apology. What we see so much of the time is this kind of boilerplate cut and paste bullshit, where one apology looks a lot like one we saw about 6 months ago, looks like one we saw about a year and a half ago. And it's been happening for like a decade at this point, at least from in my recollection. It's been at least like 10 years that we've seen these same boilerplate bullshit apologies. And sometimes there's some responsibility taken, but what really seems to be lacking in every single one of these is no one is showing that they both want to grow and actively work on themselves, moving themselves as a person forward. They may admit that they've done something wrong, but that's pretty much where the line is drawn, and nothing else is accepted or expected of them at that point.
There's also a lot of, I'm sorry if this happened, not I'm sorry that this happened.
That's like one of those things you talk about in therapy, as I've been bringing up in almost every episode now.
Mm-hmm.
When someone gives you that BS apology, where it's not really an apology, and you're like, you're fighting with a partner or, a family member, and they say, like, I'm sorry that you're upset because I did this. It's not really an apology. You're not saying, like, I'm sorry my actions have hurt you, and you're not really thinking of what the other person is going through on their end. Like, maybe there's trauma that you're triggering by the things that you did or said. You're like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry I did what I did, but I'm sorry that this happened to you in that way, that you internalized the good thing that I did, and now you're upset with me. Not my fault. Like, that's not right. We need to work better. We need to be better on that as individuals and as a collective scene.
Yeah. And to sort of get back into it, all that just moves away from the tried and true definition of cancel culture and closer to two other definitions that we've mentioned before: restorative justice and transformative justice. We'll be discussing both in length in the future. But for now, it's important to remember that transformative justice is relational. It happens at the scale of community. Call-outs now often happen at the scale of viral threads and amongst strangers. And that is straight from the book, We Will Not Cancel Us.
It's important to note that the act of canceling can be applied to people, as we discussed. But when someone makes a conscious decision to not buy the products that someone creates, and that could include like albums or books or other artistic endeavors or just boilerplate products, if they make a conscious decision to not attend certain events or to remove their support on social media because of something that someone did or something that someone said, this is not canceling someone. That's just simply the person's right to choose to not support someone else. And that's totally okay. It's not the same thing as canceling someone, though.
The purpose of this podcast is and has never been to call for the cancellation of any person or band. That's not what we're about. We've been saying it since the beginning, and we will continue to remind people about that because people need to be reminded. We do, however, allow our guests to give insight into what it looks like to people in their lives who continue to support abusers. That's not cancellation, that's just education.
So, cancel culture. Horrible internet tool used to ruin millions of lives, or is it a way to stand up against what is wrong in the world? It's really all about how you use it and what your intent is behind it.
Also, the only people who are scared of being canceled are people who have done something to warrant them being canceled. Enough is a podcast centering on abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like or subscribe and share with your friends. If you have been on the receiving end of harm from someone, be it artist, venue owner, audience member, or someone else, and would like to share your story on a future episode, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com. All correspondences are kept confidential.